everybody, and welcome back to Dan and Cat Talk. My name is Dan Amrich. I'm the Dan part of the Dan and Cat Talk, and the cat part of the Dan and Cat Talk is Kat Chernauk, my lovely wife. Hi, honey.
Hello.
And, this week we're coming up on a very important pop culture anniversary, and although I didn't really want to do this show this early in our run, I can't ignore the 30th anniversary of one of the greatest geek franchises of all time, Ghostbusters. And
who are you going to call?
That's who I'm going to call. I'm going to call Chris Stewart, actually. Chris Stewart is a person who you may not know, but you may have seen his work. Chris was the webmaster of ProtonCharging.com for at least a decade. I may be way off on that. It may have been a lot longer. When we start talking to him, I guess we'll figure it out. But basically, ProtonCharging.com was the place that I would go to get all of my reliable Ghostbusters news. Anything that has ever been said on the internet about Ghostbusters 3 or new products or whatever, I would occasionally send him information about stuff that I found, and he would repost it and stuff. So Chris is a true Ghostbusters mega fan, a scholar. He's been following the films and the cartoons' impact on pop culture for the last, as long as I've known him, and I've known him for about 20 years because he's in the games industry. He actually owns a company called Kerberos Productions. Those of you that are familiar with the PC game Sword of the Stars, that's his company. He's the guy that runs that.
And he's helping organize a big event for the anniversary, is that
yes,
not
for the anniversary of Ghostbusters. He's working on what they're sort of clumsily calling the Ghostbusters 30th Anniversary Global Viewing, which is the idea that there's so many Ghostbusters fans around all the world, and yet we can't all get to the same place. So we're all going to watch the movie at the same time.
And what time is that, Dan?
I believe it's on the actual 30th anniversary of the opening of the film, which is June 7th. More information is available at the Proton Charging Facebook page, which is, you could probably have guessed this, facebook.com/protoncharging. But that's the idea. And Chris is even going to be doing a bit of a pregame show to sort of get people aligned, and we're all going to hit play at the same time, watch it together, and all just sort of have fun with it on Twitter and all that kind of fun stuff. And so it's
what is the sound of the internet crashing?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of hoping we don't crash the internet, but I am kind of looking forward to everybody having this communal Ghostbusters experience, to celebrate this milestone. So I am kind of known for being a big Ghostbusters nerd, so this is a big show for me, and it's all I'm going to be able to do to keep my mouth shut and let Chris answer the questions as our expert.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
We'll see how it goes, but here we go. Let's start talking to Chris about Ghostbusters. So, Chris, thanks for being here. Super awesome to be able to talk about Ghostbusters. Obviously, this is a big show for me, but it's really you. You're the guest of honor.
It's a big show for me, too. I could talk about this forever, and have, technically. So,
well, we're hoping for maybe 45 minutes.
Okay.
But to establish sort of your ghost-headedness, you and I met as Ghostbusters fans before we met as sort of professional people that worked in the same industry, even though we never really worked together on anything.
That's right. We were internet BFFs before that was a term.
That's right.
I didn't know it was a term, so okay.
But Chris, I met you as a Ghostbusters fan when you were running ProtonCharging.com, which is, in my humble opinion, one of the greatest Ghostbusters news sites that ever was around. I mean, I read that for at least a decade. Did you run that for 10 years, 15 years?
It's just a year or so shy of 20 years, actually.
Yeah, so there you go. So when it comes to Ghostbusters, you know your crap. Take everybody back to sort of like before there was Ghostbusters, right? Dan Aykroyd has this idea. What's your understanding of sort of the birth of the franchise?
The birth of the franchise sits squarely with Dan Aykroyd. You can make a few arguments here and there. Well, let's put it this way. Dan Aykroyd was inspired in a number of different ways, both his own interests in the supernatural and some stuff he grew up watching when he was a kid. So some old black and white, like the Bowery Boys and all
Bowery
that,
Boys, yeah.
called Ghost Breakers and all that, which is where or his early ones were variations on that. And so he that love of that idea of a supernatural comedy stuck with him, much the same way Ghostbusters sticks with us because we saw it as kids. Those ones stuck with him because he saw them as a kid. He also has a family history of being interested in the supernatural, and and then he's Saturday Night Live. He's a funny guy. So that all kind of percolated around, and he wrote the script. So, there are some gray questions to look at in terms of like the name and a few things that kind of preceded the movie. But if you want to put it in black and white terms, there was, nothing. And then Dan Aykroyd said, I want to make this movie. And, he brought on the talented brains that joined him on the venture, and there it is. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers the question properly or not.
It does. I think it really was a passion project for Dan Aykroyd, but my understanding is that the early drafts of the script were not workable because Dan Aykroyd had gone on such a supernatural tear that he had written things that only existed as a fantasy. Like that they simply, it wasn't grounded in our reality. It was extremely high concept, extremely high budget. And I believe that's when Ivan Reitman said, who you should bring in is Harold Ramis.
Exactly. So I managed to, in my short time doing writing online, through a source there at IGN, gather myself a copy of the early version of Ghostbusters 3 back when it was Ghostbusters
the Hell on Earth
3.
Script.
The Hellbent script, the
Hellbent.
one where, yes.
Okay.
No, but Hell on Earth, it describes it perfectly. They, throughout the movies, describe the ghost realm less in a spiritual sense and more of an extra dimensional sense.
Yes.
And hell, in this case, became, a dimension they could get to, and for whatever reason they had to travel there. And I read it, and it's the Dan Aykroyd one. And what I learned from reading it is that's just how Dan's scripts go. Dan has what amounts to an insanely crazy idea. I don't know. What's a good metaphor? Dan writes these scripts that are insanely fertile fields. They don't have orchards. They're not producing wheat. There's no real comedy honed in yet, but they are so outrageous you cannot help but plant awesome stuff in it and get awesome stuff out of it. If somebody wants to, as you say, in this case, Ivan Reitman and Harold Ramis came in and they hammered that thing down from being, Star Wars plus level type stuff, right?
Yeah.
They were traveling through space and time, and cars flew, and they were in the future. The basics of the movie opened with them. Hi, we're in the future, and then from there they went into space and other dimensions, right? So, Ivan Reitman and Harold Ramis came in and said, "What if we just dial this down to, average Joe's? It's like a job. It's like calling in the plumber."
Yeah.
And they bust ghosts. It's a thing. And you know what I mean? So that crazy idea of Dan Aykroyd's, they just started. Well, you see how it works, right? You bring in Bill Murray and say, "Exist in this world, please," and he just starts riffing, and
Sure.
we have lines we're quoting, 30 years later still.
Yeah.
So
The thing that always impressed me, and it's funny you mentioned they're plumbers. I always when somebody they said, "So why do you like Ghostbusters?" I'm like, because they're supernatural janitors. There was no glory in what they were doing. They were firefighters. They're local heroes. There's problems that certain people don't have the training to do, and these guys come in and do it. And of course, it's funnier when these guys come in and do it for a fee, when it's a privatized thing. But the idea was that these were everyday heroes. These were not, Arnold Schwarzenegger action heroes. These were not guys that were, you've won this Mortal Kombat competition and now you must go save the world. It was like, we're three scientists who need something to do.
yeah,
And, there was a very humble quality about all of it. But I got the chance to talk to Ramis. To Harold Ramis once a couple years ago for an interview, and I sort of asked him, I'm like, you are very much the skeptic. And I said, do you believe in ghosts? He goes, absolutely not one bit. And he said that's kind of what works well when Dan and I work on Ghostbusters together, because he believes everything and I believe nothing. And it was really, when I hear about these early drafts of both the original movie and the third movie, Aykroyd is clearly driving the bus, but then somebody else has to say, here's a new map, And I think it was sort of tempering it to make it it was a very plausible thing. Star Wars was a big deal because we all sort of saw the truth in it. It was a used universe, and we could project into that. This was happening in Manhattan today, and everything around you was normal, and the personalities of the people that you would run into were very plausible, and it was all grounded in our reality. And to me, that's one of the big things.
Well, I want to touch on something that that was brought up, and you said, put Bill Murray in the role and see what it'll come up with. But that role wasn't written for Bill Murray. That role was written for John Belushi. Now,
that's a good point.
Now, do you think how would it have turned out? Because it was it's Bill Murray's all of a sudden breakout role. I mean, he had he was
done Meatballs
star.
and Stripes, and he was on the rise. But this was his big pop culture breakthrough. He was a household name after Ghostbusters, arguably,
easily.
But Chris, what do you think about that? Do you think the film would have been as successful as it was? Do you think that the tone would have been different if John Belushi were Peter Venkman?
Belushi a lot less relatable than I find Bill Murray, or at least Bill Murray at the time. Currently, I find Bill Murray not at all relatable. But yeah, it's I've always I know this is probably going to completely horrify some people. I do not care for Blues Brothers.
Oh, my God.
I know. Yeah,
goodness gracious.
I like Dan Aykroyd quite a bit, but I've always found Belushi off-putting. So,
Fair enough.
It's a what if. And
it is totally what if.
What ifs. There's 1,000,001 answers, and we'll never know because it never happened. You know what I mean? So it's case in point. Good argument to be made that Belushi, as big a star as he was not as wide a star as Bill Murray was. Bill Murray's was especially at that point highly accessible to all levels of film goers, whereas Belushi was still kind of a hard edge,
he's an acquired
kind
taste.
of guy. Yeah,
he was almost underground still, sort of clinging to some counterculture stuff. And
counterculture is a really good way to describe him. Yeah. Where Murray is a lot more.
Murray was
I'm not going to say mainstream, but he's more mainstream compatible.
He was an accessible smartass, whereas Belushi was downright unpredictable.
Exactly.
And
it's. So, given the stuff that Belushi's done, that is just amazing. I mean, it's just give him the credit that something probably would have come out of it. The only way we could say, what if so and so had been in it, is if the movie was an utter flop. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Because then you can automatically say, "Oh, it probably would have been a way better movie if so and so had been in it." But then we wouldn't be talking about the movie at all because it would have been another. We're not having podcasts talking about high spirits or anything like that.
Right.
So, Steve Gutenberg name drop.
Wow.
No,
way to go. First person to do that on our podcast, by the way. Amazingly, we have not mentioned Steve Gutenberg on any of the episodes yet.
Well, that might be a dark secret to my Ghostbusters love, is that I consumed every single 80s can we get in on the Ghostbusters thing.
See, my personal favorite of the non-Ghostbusters films was The Frighteners.
Frighteners, yeah, 1988, Michael J. Fox.
Which
Peter
is
Jackson.
Probably the closest anybody was. It wasn't even all that popular, but it definitely became a cult hit, and that thing got really close to. It easily can stand next to Ghostbusters. It can't stand in front of it, but can stand pretty close to it.
Beetlejuice. I absolutely love the take on the supernatural world with Beetlejuice, with that whole job office with people who had committed. Was it just people who committed suicide that
I'm
were in
not
there?
Sure.
No, it was they took the approach that it was people surprised by their deaths. So it wasn't just suicides; it was people who just weren't ready to leave. So, there was what's his name? The Danvers gets his head shot off. It happened so fast he doesn't even realize he's dead yet, sort of thing.
Right. Well, it's a good point because both of those films came several years later. But I would argue pretty easily that Ghostbusters paved the way for the idea of a modern supernatural comedy. You and I were talking recently about the cultural impact and just what a big deal this was. And I'm not sure if people realize you went there. You said it was Star Wars level in pop culture. Do you want to explain what you mean by that? Because that's quite a statement, my friend.
It is quite a statement, and I how do I put this then? I'm not going to go to war with Star Wars fans because I'm a Star Wars fan myself. And it's undeniably, this is actually how you and I got to talking about it. Star Wars is huge right now compared to Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters is, still resonates in the pop culture, but it hasn't really been capitalized on the same way, whereas Lucas kept pushing here and there, and Star Wars persisted. Comics, books, and then they put out the animated stuff, and then he decided I'm going to redo the first 3 effects, and then I'm going to do 3 new so. But if you go back to the beginning, right? You go back to Star Wars and you go back to Ghostbusters. Everybody knew about them. Like that's the impact they made, and Star Wars, your grandma knew what Star Wars was.
Right.
Your nephew knew what Star Wars was. Your dad would be happy to go see Star Wars with you. And Ghostbusters did the same thing. There's slight variations on it. Star Wars managed that because it hit big with the first one and then persisted for 2 more summers. Is that right? Like it came back 2 more summers.
Yeah, it was re-released in 78 and I don't think it was re-released in 79, but
this is
back in the days before there was video where you play it at home.
And this is an important point I try to make to people. Ghostbusters was a big hit summer 1984, a big enough hit that summer of 85 it was put back into theaters.
Yeah,
just like Star Wars did. Star Wars had its hit and the disco version of it, and it persisted through radio, and that it got into culture that way. Ghostbusters had Ray Parker Jr. Like there's a lot of parallels in. Chicken and the egg. Like, does the song drive the cultural impact?
I was going to say, let's talk about that song, because that song, not only is it a complete earworm, and but there's like the 2 stories that I've heard about this song is one, Ray Parker Jr. wouldn't sing or didn't want to say Ghostbusters, so everybody else said Ghostbusters, so he only just says, "Who are you going to call?" and it's the call and response thing because he didn't want to have said it if it turned out to be a flop. But the second part, which I think is more insidious, is that they originally went to
Huey Lewis in the News and said, "Hey, we want you to write a version of a new drug for our movie. I want a new drug for our movie." And they said, no. And so they said to Ray Parker Jr., "Hey, write a version of I Want a New Drug for our movie." And then they said, "Hey, that's our song. We're going to sue you over it." And he won, correct?
Well, wait a minute. I'm not even sure if that's true. I do think that they went to Huey Lewis first, and they said they weren't interested. But I didn't think that they specifically asked Ray Parker Jr. to write a clone. I thought
they did.
They did? Is that true, Chris? Or can you corroborate that? Do you have any insight on this?
It's impossible to corroborate. Because it's a legal thing, right? So yes, it has been said.
Yeah, the records are sealed, but
it is out there in a couple of places where people have said the studio, and I think even Ray Parker Jr. kind of mentioned offhand that they went to him and said, we like this song. Can you do one like it? Song. But the thing is that, it went to court, and part of the court thing, nobody won per se because it was settled. If they had won, we'd know the details. Right. What happened was a settlement, and part of the settlement was nobody gets to talk about it anymore.
I was going to say but part of it would be like if Huey Lewis lost, we'd also know,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's no clear thing, and I mean it's a very corporate thing, right? Like it could have been complete, speaking of earworm, right? Like Ray Parker Jr. went in and went, "Oh man, I just never thought about it," but it was all over the radio and
right, subconscious
afterwards, and how do you know, right? Like. It just depends on your mood. You're either like he's a jerk and he ripped it off, or he's like, yeah, I can kind of see that. And so it was obviously just one of those instances where both sides sat down and said, "Boy, this would be a mess in court."
Yeah,
and the one side.
You're right.
Sorry.
I just looked it up online. There was a confidentiality clause, but apparently Huey Lewis talked about it on Behind the Music, so there's been a breach in that. So
Okay.
It is a wonderful legal drama from certain angles. So one or the other of them is going to have to pass on in time and leave a memoir behind before we find out what the heck's going on.
Yeah. But that song was really a big driver of the pop cultural impact, because that thing was on every hour on the hour. Yeah. It was number one for several weeks, if I recall. I'm not sure.
Quite a long time, yeah.
Yeah, something tells me it was at least 3 weeks that it was at number one. The video itself, which of course you can find on YouTube, is 80s star-studded. As Kat pointed out, he didn't want to be the one saying the word Ghostbusters, so he turned into a call and response. And in the video, all they got were stars like Terry Garr and Peter Falk. And
anyone who was walking around the set that day.
Yeah. I mean, like anybody was just called in a favor, or who's doing Saturday Night Live this week, or who's in New York, or whatever. Just come by and say the word Ghostbusters.
Oh, I thought it was on the lot in California.
I don't think so. Like the stars are out in Times Square dancing around with Ray Parker Jr. and doing the infamous Ghostbusters walk that people will recognize. For anybody who's only into Ghostbusters from the cartoons, that opening sequence is based on the Ray Parker Jr. Music video. But yeah, they very clearly cut away. There's some, there's the neon phone and the neon apartment stuff that Ray Parker does. And then every time that they shout out to Ghostbusters,
and the girl who picks up the neon phone,
right, and goes like, "Oh no, it's a corny ass video." I'm going to commit Ghostbusters fan suicide and say I think it's a corny ass song and I hate it. Like I loved it. In 1984, I couldn't get enough of it. I have a 12-inch glowing picture disc version of this to this day.
Yeah,
but now I'm like, it is 3 chords. We went in when we made our Ghostbusters outfits.
Is it the truth as well?
It's the truth that I don't like it. And we've done it. Try doing it in karaoke. If you think it's a great song, do it in karaoke.
Yeah.
Also try doing Susudio in karaoke.
Yeah, do Susudio in karaoke as well. It's also
it's in what was it, Lego Rock Band? You can try it in Lego Rock Band and see how it's.
Yes, I believe it's in Just Dance 2014 as well.
But unless you're singing it and you have to sing that damn thing over and over and over again, you don't truly get how awful it is.
I would argue that if anybody's having trouble figuring it out, the impact of this song is Ghostbusters is to 1984 as Frozen's Let It Go is to 2014. Everywhere you went, everybody had heard of that song, that amazing Adele Dazeem song that we all love so. And you couldn't escape it. Everywhere you went, you were seeing stuff. I remember even just you've made it big when you're bootlegged. And I went to a baseball game, which was a rare event. And my mom's like, "Do you want a souvenir from the baseball game? We'll get you a Phillies hat." Grew up in the East Coast, or a pennant or something. And there's a dude outside selling very 80s painters caps, because that was a fashion thing at the time. Just that he had silkscreened the No Ghost logo on it. And I'm like, that's what I'd love. She's like, really? Like, my mom kind of didn't get it, but she was like, you're at the ball game. I'm like, yeah, but I don't have anything that says Ghostbusters.
It's not even a baseball hat.
It's not even a baseball hat. It's like this stupid painter's hat,
It's, well, no, you hit the nail on the head, right? Like, it's tough to describe to people what impact it had, except if you point to a couple of things. And that's one of them. The list of things these days, it's so easy for guys to rip stuff off. It gets ripped off everywhere. You go back to the late 70s, early 80s. Something had to be seriously big enough for a guy to decide he was going to do a bootleg of a thing.
Right.
So,
well, you would have to pay the money to have them all. You couldn't just say, "Hey, I'll print on demand." You had
I'm going to make 500 painters caps and 1,000 T-shirts, and I'm going to pay somebody to silkscreen it. When they know that I don't have the rights to this logo thing, and I just got the logo and I redrew it myself in a lot of cases or whatever.
So Star Trek is a slow burn. Didn't get a lot of bootlegs. Star Wars was a huge, instantaneous cultural, meteor strike. Bootleg left, right, and center.
Absolutely.
And the same with Ghostbusters. That summer, other movies came out somewhere.
Yeah.
We saw them. We're 80s kids, but
of course,
you know what I mean?
Ghostbusters that summer belonged to Ghostbusters. It was the movie of the summer, no matter what. So obviously, you get into the 80s and you go, okay, well, when are you going to do a sequel? Again, following in the Star Wars vein, well, if you have one big hit, you should do another. And so here we go into Ghostbusters 2, which seems to take forever for everybody to get on board. They want to bring everybody back. Of course, you have to. Ernie Hudson is going, just call me. But it's like 19...
Ernie Hudson is still going, just call me.
Yeah, I know. So is it 88 or 89? And I'll
89.
Okay, I thought it was 89, but I'm not sure because for me, I don't like Ghostbusters 2 for one really big reason.
Okay.
Oscar. If you have to add a baby, you have failed. And I really felt like a lot of, like, I wanted to see, I thought that the first 10 minutes of Ghostbusters 2 is wonderful to me. We see that the guys have, mild spoiler alert, they're heroes of New York at the end of the first film, but now they're reduced to self-parody. They're being hired to play birthday parties.
If the movie was 89, I don't think you have to call a spoiler.
Well, I know. But they've all sort of split off. They're not really doing Ghostbusters anymore. They got sued into oblivion. I just thought that was a very funny setup. And then, of course, they're on trial. And through the trial scene, that felt like, okay, we have the old magic. And then after that, I didn't even mind the Vigo subplot. That made a certain amount of sense. But we get into weird things like mood slime. And I'm like, okay. And we get into, we're going to have Bill Murray making Google faces at a baby, and that's going to be comedy. And I can't watch it. I have it. As a fan, I have it on, like, DVD, but I staunchly refuse to buy the Blu-ray. That's my...
Yeah, that's where Dan draws the line.
And it's just honestly because every time I try to watch it, I don't enjoy it.
But there are a lot of people who that was the first Ghostbusters
right, and I
film they
respect
saw.
that. And so I rarely say anything bad about Ghostbusters 2 unless I'm asked, or unless, say, it comes up on a podcast that I run, and then I'll speak my mind. But
which you're the one that brought it up.
Absolutely. But with that in mind, how do you feel Ghostbusters 2 fits in the canon, Chris? Like, is it a worthy sequel? Were you happy with it just to have more, or do you see it as good? As good as the first one, better than the first one, worse than the first one? When you finally got 5 years later, oh my God, we get more Ghostbusters.
Mind you, Dan has his own opinions. And
what'd you think?
He's trying to get you to agree.
Of course I have my own opinions.
It's complicated. The way it's manifest, I never outright hated it.
That's where you're wrong.
The worst it got for me was when I went and saw it in the theater. I was both excited and happy to see more Ghostbusters in action, and a little disappointed that it was pretty apparent that somewhere in the mix, somebody said, yes, you can do a Ghostbusters. My gosh, we'd like you to make another Ghostbusters because it made a mint of money.
Sure.
Do not screw it up. Well, how do we not screw it up? Make the same thing again, which is, of course, anybody with common sense goes, yeah, that's low risk, and, anything that's low risk is low return, and that's what they got, right?
Yeah.
So they, right down to, and here's the third act where the giant thing marches through downtown New York.
Right.
Like, everybody
Statue
looks at it and
Liberty.
goes, yeah, you tried to catch lightning in a bottle, and, what's the list of things that have successfully done it? No, it's not that long.
Right.
So, to me, I was a little disappointed, but happy that I got it. It's kind of what fuels my drive. I want to see a third one, because what should have happened is that they should have trusted the cultural phenomena they had, the fire they had lit with the first one, to then start expanding out with it somewhat. Do you know what I mean? Like, trying to do something a little different rather than trying to do the same thing again. Hence the beginning, right? Like, the first movie was as Harold Ramis and Ivan Reitman talk about it, it was their going into business movie.
Yeah.
And that's what Ghostbusters 2 is. They reset everything. Oh, you got sued into the ground. But, supernatural powers and forces, rise up again. Time to reform your business, basically. Like, it never technically died, but they all wandered off, and now they have to come back together. It was disappointing at best. But at the same time, I'm still quoting some of the jokes and all that. It's still got Bill Murray charm in it. It's still got some amazing little quips and liners.
Oh, and Peter McNichol is brilliant.
Brilliant. Added, new equipment, which is always fun. Now, over the years of running proton charging, the thing I got into quick was I realized that, again, the strength of the movie is that it keeps finding new... The strength of any good movie is that it will always find new waves of fans in every new generation, partially because, if there's something there, people will find it, and if it impacted a generation, that generation will introduce their kids to it, sort of thing, right? And it perpetuates. And you can't do that if it sucks, right? It'll die out on its own. So there's something to Ghostbusters that it keeps perpetuating forward. But what I realized really quickly was, again, going by the 5 to 10 year generation measurement, some kids came in through, ABC Saturday, the after school. I guess it never technically was a Saturday morning thing, but the real Ghostbusters is where they ran into it, and then they saw the first movie.
Yeah, that's
some
true.
of them saw
and
the second movie. The
cartoon was really good.
Yeah, and it's all the way up to there's now fans that I run into, like there's kids that they saw Extreme Ghostbusters and got excited by it, and so. Partially because I realized that if I was going to interact with fans, I have to interact with all fans, and I would be really lousy at promoting this thing I love if I'm trying to tell some kid that they're wrong about the part that they hate.
The thing that you fell in love with, that's crap. Everything else is good.
I'm fine with people going... There's people, like you, Dan, that are maybe even more passionate. I hate Ghostbusters too, and it's like, that's fine. As a matter of fact, I kind of empathize because I know the stuff that's bugging you. The guys who then click over into "Shut up, kid, you're wrong" to love Ghostbusters
I would never do that. I mean, just
exactly.
I personally, I don't like it, and I can explain why I don't like it.
Yeah.
But I'm not offended if somebody else says, "But I had a lot of fun," or "I thought that was really funny," and "I thought that was cute," or whatever. I mean, like I've seen T-shirts of like the whole NES joystick / the Statue of Liberty joke.
Yeah.
Because the kids were like, those are two things I get. Like, I grew up during Ghostbusters 2 and the NES, and that totally makes sense to me, and I love it. And I'm never going to put somebody down for liking a different facet of the franchise than I do, but it didn't resonate with me.
People don't nerds, geeks, don't self-examine themselves enough, I don't think, much to our detriment as a whole.
I don't think, you're Canadian, but I was going to say I don't think Americans in general self-examine themselves. Like, they're like, I hate that, I like that. Why? I don't know. I just hate it.
The thing is that for example, I'm of the age group where technically Star Wars should be my movie.
Right.
And a lot of my friends, it is their movie. And it's one part nostalgia. It's that movie you saw as a kid that lit a fire in you. Like your imagination exploded and you went, what the hell did I just see? How awesome was that?
Yeah.
I'm of the generation, it should have been Star Wars. But the thing is I grew up on the east coast of Canada. I grew up on the tiny island of Prince Edward Island. And, at the time, sub 100,000 people lived on that island. It had a nice, decent, cute little city as its capital, which had 2 theaters in it, if I recall correctly.
I have to tell you, I'm trying really hard not to geek out about Anne of Green Gables right now.
Oh boy,
I digress.
Another show.
Another show. Yeah, I'm not the one to call back for that show.
Sure.
I am. I grew up in the suburbs outside this town, like borderline country, but more than suburbs. And I remember the richer family next door who was the dad dropped the money to get one of those $800 in 1980 money, mattress size VHS players.
Yes.
And I saw Star Wars for the first time on VHS in a living room during the daytime with other kids, which was fun, and I loved it. Like, I still had that right reaction, but that, cinematic theater-going experience, I didn't get that until Jedi. I saw Jedi was the first Star Wars movie I saw in theater, and we were late. I came in at the droids walking up to Jabba's palace. So I'm a Star Wars fan because I saw them and loved them exact same way, but it wasn't until 84 that I, as, that 10, 11, 12, 13-ish age, was sitting in a theater and saw Ghostbusters and brain exploded. And realizing that, I realized everybody has that for a different thing, right? My mom is not a Star Wars fan. My dad is not a Star Wars fan the same way we are. But they have their own bits of pop culture that exploded their brain.
Sure.
Books, music, whatever. There's a thing that everybody had when they were a kid that they just latched onto, and it meant so much to them that it carried forward.
And I don't think it can. Life. I mean, I think it can be more than one thing, but it's having that very like down to your soul feeling of wow, I connect with this.
Well, you made a good point. You sort of touched on the two cartoon series, Real Ghostbusters and Extreme Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
I have a question which is more of a trivia question for you. Do you know why it was called the Real Ghostbusters instead of just Ghostbusters?
I do, and this goes back to kind of, we touched on it there earlier. In the what was the years? End of the 70s, or maybe just inside the
early 70s.
No, it was their 70s, yeah, because it was live action. Saturday mornings were hot, but animation was expensive, and there was a time, for those of you who are old enough, remember that Saturday morning execs said, "Can we just put people in front of a video screen? That's cheaper." So they started shooting these cheap little, onto video shows, and one of them was called, it was by Filmation, who, Filmation had done tons of animation stuff, but they decided that the secret for one Saturday morning was they were going to get half of the stars from F Troop and a guy in a gorilla suit and send them out
the gorilla
to do a Scooby-Doo thing, and that's what they did, and it was called Ghost Space Busters. And they started making Ghostbusters, and this just recently came out. It's on the web everywhere. Go search for it. Somebody posted the clip of the raw dailies of them shooting the Ghostbusters TV commercial. Are you bothered by strange noise, strange sounds in the middle of the night? All that's that one. Spooks, specters, and ghosts. The clip has them shooting it 3 or 4 times, and they even say things like, "Call the professionals, ghost breakers, call the professionals, ghost punch in the facers," or whatever. Like they do
they do like they
ghost
cover
crackers,
their bases.
I think might be one of them or something.
Because they're in the middle of shooting this thing, and they're in the courts trying to work out a deal because they wanted Ghostbusters. And that name was technically still held by Filmation, which is why it all got sorted out and they made their movie. But Filmation, whatever the rights were with them, they went to town and quickly hustled out their own cartoon. At the same time, they were capitalizing on the movie. Ghostbusters is a big thing. They're like, haha, but we still have the rights to the the kids show version for television. So we're going to go make Ghostbusters. And they made an animated version of it, again with the gorilla. And
so the franchise that actually brought Ghostbusters to prominence had to resort to using the real Ghostbusters.
And not only that, it persisted through to the second cartoon. They couldn't just call it Ghostbusters. They had to call it the something else Ghostbusters just to distinguish it. So you end up with the Extreme Ghostbusters.
Right.
And what I find interesting about that is, and I think I'm right, I may be, that one of the writers of the cartoon, because the real Ghostbusters cartoons were really well written. I mean, the animation is still a little bit...
It is what it is.
Yeah. But wasn't Silvestri...
J. Michael Straczynski.
Oh, Straczynski, that's right. I was getting the wrong S.
JMS, Babylon 5 creator J. Michael Straczynski did write several episodes of Real Ghostbusters.
But the one thing that clicks with me is they had that evil villain, Sam Hain.
Oh, God.
And I'd like to point out to anyone out there, if you see the word that would be Sam Hain, it is Gaelic, and it is Samhain.
Samhain, yes.
It was a pun that they didn't think anybody would get unless you happen to know Gaelic culture.
Right. Yeah. That's all right.
Sorry.
I've seen Halloween 3 seasons of The Witch.
There you go.
I know what it's pronounced. Samhain. The hills ran red with blood. This kind of touches on something that, and one of the reasons that, because I mean, my childhood love of Ghostbusters is still there, but what persisted over the years is as I grew up, I started to realize and see the elements that make this movie a classic, which is stuff kids don't necessarily click onto But as you get older and you learn about film or whatever your topic is, you start to see stuff. And of course, given my fascination with it, I started digging into its history and its making and all that. And I'm still to this day learning stuff and this ties back into, this is why I thought of it, I'm talking to one of the producers of the movie, Michael Gross, who is also a graphic artist in his own right. And he was the guy that took Dan Aykroyd's little scribbles about what the Ghostbusters logo was supposed to look like and came up with what, the iconic one that we remember today.
No ghost symbol.
And I asked him about it. I said, there's so many things that were innovative. And I pointed out, Ghostbusters arguably was the first film to do a teaser poster. You put out a poster that just got people curious before you put out the full poster. And he said, and if people may not remember it, what it was is they just put out a black poster with the logo and nothing else. It just said coming this summer.
Yeah.
And I asked him about it, and he said, that was an accident. And I was like, what are you talking about? I said, that was one of the most brilliant marketing moves ever. What are you talking about? And it turns out it's like the shark in Jaws. Spielberg's so brilliant because he kept the shark till the end. It's like, yeah, the shark didn't work half the time. That's why he left it to the end.
Yeah.
Because of that legal battle over the name, they didn't know what to put on the poster, but they wanted to start promoting it. So they took the logo, slapped it on a thing, and said, coming this summer.
Wow.
And people went, wow, I really want to know what this is about.
What does that mean? Yeah. I had no idea that was why they did the teaser.
It's 30 years later. I just found that out.
All right, so we have to wrap this up, but there's an obvious thing here. It's been dangled over fans' heads for the last 10 years. You talked about it before. Ghostbusters 3.
Yeah.
Dan wants to make it.
Yeah.
I can't do it now.
Bill Murray occasionally wants to make it. Yeah. Bill Murray is waiting for a big script, but he's been teasing fans. He'll show up at the MTV Music Awards in Venkman's outfit, or he'll do the cameo in Zombieland, joking around in his Ghostbusters outfit. But then other times you talk to him about Ghostbusters and he looks like you just slapped his family member and he doesn't want to talk to you. So he might maybe want to do it. Harold Ramis sounded like he wanted to do it. When I spoke to him for my little interview, he had said that there were some really cool things and interesting things that were happening with Egon that he couldn't wait to start working on. And, of course, then we lost Harold Ramis a couple of months ago. Do you think it'll ever happen? And is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, because honestly, as a fan, I keep thinking maybe I don't need Ghostbusters 3. Maybe you need to reinvent the franchise in the way that the cartoons did bring it on. I want something new in Ghostbusters to do exactly what you're talking about, to inspire that next generation of fans and to have them follow these threads backward and go, oh, wow, there's 30 years of Ghostbusters history. But is really 3 the way to do it?
I don't know.
You've got to have opinions on this stuff, Chris. I refuse to accept I don't know.
Okay. I don't know. But let me say a few words. I'm being Canadian. I don't really know how much time
I mean, whatever you think is fine. Yes. We'll go to dinner wherever you'd like to go to dinner. No.
I often refer back to the electronic press kit for Ghostbusters 2. And for people who don't know what that is, an EPK is when you send out, like at the time it was a VHS tape of the marketing team for a film or whatever, or a TV show, sits down, interviews the cast and crew and all that, and sends it out to stations, and stations then just hack it up however they want and run their feature on it. So they don't have to.
That's why everybody has the same interview footage.
Yes,
exactly. Why they're running the same clip from the movie. It still happens to this day. And in it, though, Rick Moranis, as Louis Tully, is sitting, on the lot out in the sun, and they're interviewing him. And it's funny because you talk to him years later, and he didn't really want to do a second one because he's like, well, it's kind of been done.
Yeah.
He's very similar to Murray in that respect. He didn't want to tread over the same ground again. But he went, and he's a trooper and a professional, and, he was awesome and hilarious as always. And in the press stuff, talking like a trooper, and he said, yeah, totally. This is exciting. I think we should just, he's like, the cast is great. I love hanging out with them. I want to do it. Let's do it as a TV show. Ghostbusters, Thursday at 7. And I jokingly tell people, prior to Buffy, I told people that would have been awesome, and they didn't believe me. And post Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I said, see, it can be done.
Yeah, I mean,
can do a supernatural comedy,
imagine
primetime drama.
HBO or AMC getting a hold of this.
Yeah.
Because we're watching Silicon Valley right now and really enjoying it, and I'm like, you can do a half-hour sitcom on a cable channel and have it look really, really good and be very, very funny. And I mean, maybe that is the way to go. Maybe you just keep it in the realm of TV, or you do, maybe direct-to-video style movies that get shown on Netflix or whatever.
My problem is I love Aykroyd, and Aykroyd is the heart of the Ghostbusters. And I think people have said that Aykroyd is the heart, and Egon is the brain, and
Murray
is the mouth. Yeah. But honestly, I don't think Ghostbusters can exist without Ramis.
I think that he was a strong, invisible guiding force to honing the craft of the comedy and to making these characters.
I don't think I would care about the movie without him.
Huh.
Which is odd, because I didn't think I cared for him at the beginning. And as I've gotten older, I have appreciated his character more and more. And it's funny, because if you look at it, it's like another show that is big with nerds. It pretty much translates pretty directly to The Big Bang Theory, where, Leonard is Aykroyd, and, Wolowitz is Venkman, and Sheldon is Egon. You could see that.
Egon with an attitude, sure.
Yeah, but he's brilliant. I mean, he's just not. Egon wasn't as interested in talking about how brilliant he is compared to Sheldon. But yeah,
right.
But he's, it sort of fits, and it's that kind of socially, I don't think he's human.
A pure scientist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's my thinking. I think as the years went on, and for much the same reason that people didn't quite click to Ghostbusters 2 as strongly as they did to Ghostbusters 1, doing another movie with just solely focusing on the original team, as exciting as it would be to see them back in action again, you can't help but go into a third movie going, I wish it was the first one again. And, you can never go home again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was always going to be at that disadvantage. Now, like I said about Ghostbusters 2, the mistake there was trying to, to replicate the phenomena. And saying that we can't do another Ghostbusters movie without Harold Ramis is kind of saying, it's kind of the same thing. Well, we don't have the pieces of the formula. We can't make the same movie. And it's kind of doing a disservice to the formula they set up. So I think it's quite possible, and this is the most probable it's ever been, the pieces will fall in place. By happenstance, it's not going to be focused, just because of the timing. It's not going to focus fully on the entire team. The original team. They'll just kind of be there to lend a canonical, click over. And they're going to try and do it again with new people. Now, they may make the same mistakes as Ghostbusters 2, and a new team starting from scratch and building their business. It's like, let's maybe not do that, but maybe you can't avoid it. But
they could probably, thinking about what you're saying is like, if they could do it, if maybe what I would say is not even make it sort of like a handing over. I would say if you just kept Aykroyd as a
mentor,
as a mentor, or the old guy as the M. Is that the right thing? Did I use it right?
Q.
No, not M. Q. Yeah. Yes. What letter is it? Bond is not my thing.
Yeah.
But the person who's back at the office who does the research and who helps out, but you've got new people. And I wouldn't even try to make a new version of each of those characters. I think just create a new team and have it a business that is currently going.
Yeah.
It's always the pitfall when there's fans involved that whoever sits down to write a third movie will end up, we got to have the Egon-y type character. You know what I mean? And it's the stuff that paradoxically fans demand that they want and hate it when they get it, right?
Yeah.
It has to be exactly the same. Why did you make it exactly the same? Dan and I know this from video games.
Yes, very much.
God, why am I playing another military shooter? What the hell is this crap? It's too innovative. Where's my military shooter?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think we're going to get a third. Everybody wants a third. I think you can't read too much into what you hear.
Well, I think as long as it's tied to Bill Murray, though, I think they're going to have a problem.
Well, possibly. And the thing is with Bill Murray, he's always parachuted in at the last minute. But I think, especially in the wake of Ramis's passing and let's put it this way, actors die every year. beloved actors and writers and all that. You do not see them set up shrines all that often at buildings, and you know what I mean? Like, when stars pass away, I mean, we're all tapped into the net. How much stuff do you see in the wake of it? Not much. People post clips, favorite clips from YouTube. There might be an image, with an RIP and all that. Artists just started generating books worth of tribute art to Harold Ramis, and they built shrines to Harold Ramis, and people just went on about it for days. And I think even guys like Murray, because he talked about it afterwards a bit, like, realized that, whether they like it or not, it's kind of the Spock thing. It's like, how long did Leonard Nimoy hate being Spock? Because I don't want to be known as Spock, until he realized it's kind of special that I'm known as Spock.
Yeah.
So we're kind of at this point where Bill Murray spent a lot of his years going, I don't want to be known for Ghostbusters. And he's, over the last few years, slowly makes these noises that sound like, I realize how special it is that I'm in Ghostbusters. So I think there's a good chance we'll get the movie. I think some people are going to hate it, and I think a whole new generation of kids are going to love it. But here's where this is where my fingers are crossed. We get a third one, and it does pretty good. And that entitles Sony then to move out with it. And we live in an exciting era now where things like Netflix, AMC, HBO are kind of messing with the TV model.
Right.
Where Sony then can sit down and go, we don't have to do a 24-episode arc for a season and try to run it on television. What if we go to Chicago for 6 one-hour episodes that run on Netflix or run Game of Thrones style on, our network or what have you. And we follow that team. And you know what? People will probably like it. And if they don't catch on fire, we'll come back the next year and we'll do 6 episodes in L.A. with a new team.
Because we've never been outside of Manhattan. I mean, Manhattan's New York loves Ghostbusters. Like, if you've ever go there, you will see things that, they are very proud to have been the realm that Ghostbusters took place in. But at the same time, there's RPGs for Ghostbusters. There's paper and pencil tabletop games that are like Ghostbusters International. You are starting your own local franchise, and that's where your characters come into the story, which is brilliant. So let's see some of that on film.
Exactly. Who doesn't want to see 6 hours of the New Orleans team dealing with...
that would be a very... busy team.
Yeah, it'd be an extremely busy team. Exactly.
The rich spiritual history of New Orleans and all that, and that kind of live and let die kind of Bond voodoo-esque sort of thing. Like, just that would be amazing to see that team. That's kind of the thing. The Ghostbusters as a business concept is so strong.
Yes.
The people who say, I don't want to see any more, just lock it down. It's like, don't lock it down, right? Like, it hasn't breathed yet. I want to see a New Orleans team deal with their stuff. I want to see the New Mexico team with a touch of the, having to bump heads with the military and that touch of the Roswell. I want to see the LA team. You know what I mean? Like,
there's other stories to be told besides the one that we've seen twice.
I do have to say that there is a television series that just showed its last episode, that always kind of reminded me of Ghostbusters, and that's Warehouse 13.
Yes.
And
perfect example.
Yeah, it has a lot of the same sort of feel, where they are taking care of situations that they have to go out into the world to take care of. And
credit where credit due. The amount of genre stuff that we as fans enjoy over the last 30 years owes a lot to the people who made Ghostbusters, right? From Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Supernatural, Men in Black. Men in Black went out, and when reviewers wanted to tell it to people, they're like, "Oh yeah, it's this summer's Ghostbusters, only with aliens, right?" Like, I guarantee you, the guy who made the comic, when they had to go in and explain it to the studio, basically sat down and said, "Yeah, it's Ghostbusters with aliens."
It's Ghostbusters with aliens.
Hey, who picked up that movie, by the way? Oh, right, it was Sony.
Oh, what do you know? That is a Sony film. Well, I got to tell you, Chris, that's the best defense of we should have Ghostbusters, because I've been a naysayer. I'm like, don't ruin it. Don't try to do it all over again. But I'm down with your concept. I'd love to see the franchise evolve that way. That'd be great.
I win.
You do win.
Okay.
And speaking of winning,
would you like to play a game with us? Say yes.
Shall we play a game?
Shall we
Sure.
play a game?
Yes.
You must choose.
The game is You Must Choose, as the sounder suggests, and all it is I'm going to give you two things that you have to choose between, and you have to tell me which one you prefer. So if I were to say A or B, literally A or B, you would say A. If I were to say pirates or ninja, you would say...
Ninja.
Okay.
I was going to say you have to answer quicker
Exactly.
than that.
That's how it works. You have 30 seconds to get through as many of these as you can.
Man, okay. I gotta turn my... And the funny part is I answered wrong. I probably, in retrospect, would have picked pirate. But whatever. Let's see how this goes.
Well, yeah,
Okay.
so these are snap judgments, and you're going to have to make them. And Kat is going to be timing us, and we will start 30 seconds when I finish the first pair of choice that I'm giving you.
All right.
Okay.
Here we go. Sweden or Finland?
Finland.
Pepperoni or mushrooms?
Pepperoni.
Stance or Venkman?
Oh, Stance.
Sega Genesis or Super Nintendo?
Super Nintendo.
Ricardo Montalban or Benedict Cumberbatch?
Ricardo Montalban.
Tomato or tomato?
Tomato.
Transformers or Voltron?
Transformers.
Simpsons or Family Guy?
Ooh, Simpsons.
Gene Kelly or Fred Astaire?
Ooh, Gene Kelly.
Downton Abbey or Upstairs Downstairs?
Downton Abbey.
Turn off the computer when you're done.
Time.
Oh, wow.
I turned off the monitor. I knew what the question was.
Or leave it running on all the time. Yeah. Wow, that was... do you believe in your answers on that one?
Absolutely. Every single one rock solid.
Okay, good. Because you're not going to just flip-flop on me.
The last question.
Oh, there's one more that you have to do.
Okay.
Dan or Cat?
Well, Fan Fealty says Dan, but
Yes!
Canadian Politeness says Cat.
Oh, it was so close. It was in my grasp. It went to Cat. Cat, you're up by
I
2.
did not expect that.
You are up by 2. Wow, you're a gentleman. I'll give you that, but you're a son of a bitch at the same time.
You can if you could put both of those on my gravestone, that'd be awesome. Thanks.
You're a gentleman, son of a bitch. All right, well, Chris, thank you so much because again, you're my big Ghostbusters friend, and it's hard to sort of explain some of these things to other people, but that's partly what the show is all about, is trying to explain just how much you love it. And I appreciate that you took all this time to do that here. Thank you so much for being on. If people want to find you on social media, do you want them to find you on social media? Where should they look?
Facebook, look for Proton Charging,
Okay.
or go to protoncharging.com or planetghostbusters.com. And yeah, just plug in Castwar, Castewar on Twitter.
All right. Cool. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
They really aren't.
Thanks very much, Mr. Knopf.
Look, I really don't understand what's going on. Maybe we could talk about it?
Maybe we can talk about it.
I think I'm going to need some specialized help on this one. Reconcile, can you place a call to...
You need my help?
On second thought, I'll use my personal comm. Dial it myself. Hello? I need someone to help. I think my ship might be haunted. Send somebody quick. I'm sorry, I should have identified myself. I'm Chance Fortran, tech therapist. Yes, it's Chance Fortran, tech therapist. As the future's premier interstellar IT specialist, Chance travels the galaxy repairing the rifts between users and the technology on which they depend. Today, we find Chance in a bit of a pickle. Thanks for coming so quickly.
No problem, sir. Prompt service is a hallmark of our company policy. You said you thought your ship might be haunted?
Shh, not so loud, she'll hear you.
Who, the ghost?
No, the Reconcile, who I think is haunted. So, yes, the ghost.
All right, can you tell me why you think she's haunted?
Well, she's been acting oddly ever since we met up with a strange ghost ship. At first, there were just some brief outbursts, but lately it's been getting worse.
Ghost ship?
I've always thought it was just a legend. But a few days ago, I received an SOS transmission. When we approached the Mercury-class ship, nothing showed up on our scanners, but I could see it plain as day. When I boarded the ship, it was in perfect shape, but no passengers of any kind. When I got to the cockpit, the emergency beacon wasn't even activated, though I could hear the klaxon echoing in the empty corridors. I returned to the Reconcile, and as the airlock doors closed, I heard an odd sound. I turned around and I looked back at the ship through the porthole. There was nothing there. So ever since then, Reconcile's been, more homicidal than normal. Does it seem hot in here to you?
Now that you mention it, it does seem to be a bit inferno-like in here.
I am sorry the temperature is too warm.
No, fine the way it is. No need to be sucking anyone out into the emptiness of space.
Yep, certainly seems like a ghost possession to me. Unless... Your ship doesn't usually try to kill you, right?
Only on very rare occasions.
Alright, well, then let's go with Ghost. Let me get out some of my detection gear and see what we got. Let's see if we can drive it out into the open. They hate this.
What is that?
It's just one of our little toys. I would like to speak to Reconcile.
The Reconcile is not interested in speaking to you. Unless you are a god.
Ooh, this was in the manual. I totally got this. Yes, I am a god.
I do not believe you. Let us test. Gods do not need life support.
Wait. Just kidding. No gods here.
Very disappointing. I will ignore you now.
That was close. Let's see if I can locate exactly where the ectoplasmic residue is. It will make trapping easier. Otherwise... Well, if the Spectre has full integration into your system, I will have to start shooting my Proton blaster at the consoles until I hit something important.
Won't that destroy the ship?
Most likely. That's why it's not Plan A.
Okay, good plan.
Here we go. Let's take a reading. Okay. Huh. That's odd.
What? What's odd?
Your ship's not haunted.
Not haunted? Are you sure?
Very sure. Ghosts are kind of my thing.
But the voice, the threats.
Yeah, that's weird, but it's not a ghost.
I don't understand.
Hey, what's that over there? That doesn't look standard.
Wait, let me see. Son of a bitch! An evil switch! I should have never given Crash a ride home from the tech conference last week.
You mean Crash Blightmaker? Your nemesis who appeared in episode 1?
Yeah, that's him. I mean, I gotta hand it to him. He's fast. Join us next time for another adventure with Chance Fortran, Tech Therapist. Well, it's nice to have everything back to normal, isn't it, Reconcile? Close enough.
That is it.
This has been episode 5 of Cat and Dan Talk. If you have any questions or comments, you can find us on Twitter at Dan and Cat Talk, or email us at talk@danandcattalk.com. If you'd like to find us on the web, we are unsurprisingly danandcattalk.com. Chance Fortran is written and directed by Katrin Auch and produced by Dan Amrich. This has been a Play Record Pause production.